I would like to talk about 8 characteristics of the adult learner. Now, I'd like to explain what I mean by the adult learner, because in some places, like in North America and Europe, when we think about the adult learner going back to school, we're thinking about someone who's finished high school and then has gone to college or university and then is going back to school. Sometimes that's what we think when we think about the adult learner. Well, when we consider maybe like internationally, how about an adolescent? Is he a child or an adult? You know, he's like kind of in between. Some of what we're going to discuss right now applies to young adults in developing countries, for instance. Now, maybe they haven't finished school or their schooling, secondary schooling, but they're going into a vocational school. Now, some of what we're going to talk about does apply. So we have to understand that the concept of the adult is a bit different depending on where you're from and what culture you're from. I come from a North American culture perspective, so that's what I have. I'm a bit biased in the way I look at it. But I've traveled around the world. I've been to Africa several times, and I've worked for 3 years in Haiti in a vocational school, teaching teachers there and also the administration at that school. And when I was there, I realized you had people who were 16, 17, and they were like entering into adult life. They haven't finished high school, but they had responsibilities. They had to work in order to survive, to bring food for their family, their parents. And some of them started families quite young. They were maybe 17, 18, and they already had a child. Now, that's what I have behind my mind when I'm doing this course. Like if you've listened to the introductory video, you might have noticed that the course is geared towards vocational teachers in developing countries. And I want to highlight that. Now, anyone can take these courses, of course, if you're teaching adults or even if you're teaching children and you want to learn the differences and all that, you're more than welcome to follow these courses. But I want to highlight that this course, these courses that or this video you're looking at right now, is geared towards teachers in vocational schools in developing countries. Now, that's why ADÜED International was formed. Now, let's go back to the title, 8 important characteristics of the adult learner. Now, adults are characterized, one thing, by maturity. Now, what is maturity? Is it physically, socially? Well, they're mature. They've been through different experience. So that's something that is very different from the child. And I do understand that some of the stuff that I'll be talking about here is a bit of a repetition of what you've already listened to or read, but it's important for us to really dive into it and try to really understand the differences between a child and adult when it comes to learning. That's the purpose of this video. Really understand there is a difference. If some people say, no, there's not too much difference, there is a difference. And since there is a difference, then we should adapt to that as teachers. We should teach differently to children than to adults. And I've heard people teaching to adults that were like if they were teaching to children. Maybe that's you. Maybe you've never realized that you're teaching adults like you would teach a child. So I hope what we're going to talk about will make you reflect on that. Maybe make you think, maybe I should teach differently to people who are in front of me, to the adults who are here. So maturity, that's one thing that really characterized the adult. Self-confidence, for instance, autonomy, solid decision-making, and generally more practical, multitasking, purposeful, self-directed experience. Now, I'm mentioning a bunch of words here. I'm going to dive into it a bit deeper. Sometimes adults are less open-minded and they're receptive to change sometimes. All these traits affect their motivation as well as their ability to learn. Now, I'm going to talk about self-direction. So this is one of the traits. Self-direction. As adults, like you, I assume, we want to take responsibility for our lives and our decisions. Now, that is very different from a child. As we grow up, sometimes we take bad decisions and we have to suffer the consequences for that. But we want to take charge of our life. Says, okay, I want to do this. Maybe you're taking this course because you want to change where you are right now. Maybe you've been doing what you've been doing for years and you want to go to greater things. And you say, well, I'm going to get more education. That's good. I did that. I went back to school as an adult. Took a bachelor's degree in education. I was 32 years old. I love to learn. I'm a learner. I love to learn since I've been a kid. But I know the experience of going back to school as an adult and having children at home too. But we like to take responsibilities for our lives and our decisions. It's important for them to feel, as adults, as students, that they have control over their learning because they want to take control. So if everything is just given to them and they're just there like passively listening, they're not active in their learning, well, they won't be motivated. So as teachers, we need to understand the self-directing part of the adult. Now, another thing which is obvious, really, I think it should be obvious, the second trait is that adult learners, young adult learners also, like to listen or learn about things that are practical, result-oriented. Now, why is that? I mean, I know sometimes I like to listen to people teach and it has nothing to do with being practical, let's say, philosophy, maybe someone would argue with that, but I love to learn and learn a lot of stuff. But now I'm in the context here of a student, a mature student in a vocational school. Usually when you're in a vocational school, it's because you're thinking about your career and your future. Okay, what are you going to do? How are you going to provide for your family, for instance? So when they're sitting in class, it could be a bricklaying class, it could be nursing, it could be business. They want to hear things that are practical. Like, how am I going to use this? And sometimes they resent theory. They don't like to hear about theory. Now, are you a theoretical teacher? I'm not saying it's bad. I love theory. I mean, preparing for these little sessions, I read a lot about theory. I love it. I love to learn about that stuff. Now, I teach business, and sometimes in business, we need to teach theory. I teach at a college level that is very practical. So if there is theory, I try to make them understand why they are learning this theory. This is very, very important. So we have to think about what we're talking about to them. Is it giving them tools for their future? Is it practical for them? Because they want to see the immediate application of what they're learning. Because they're thinking about their future as a professional. So we have to tailor and change the way we teach. Now, as I'm saying this, maybe it's resonating in you. Maybe you're thinking, you're right. I think I'm teaching a bit too much theory here. I need to focus a lot on the practical side. What is it going to give them? That's very, very important. So if this video in particular, made you think about that, well, that's good. This is the purpose of having this course, right? To make you think. And by making you think, reflect on your practice, and it might change the way that you teach. Because really what we want for our students is for them to be able to improve their skills. What I want for you, the same thing, if you are a teacher right now or a future teacher, is that you will improve your skills in teaching. But yes, you understand that adults are different. How are they different? Okay, then how does that change my practice? So that's the second part, the second trait. So practical. Now, the third one, adults, another trait, they're less open-minded. and therefore more resistant to change. Some adults are like that. They're less open-minded. As a child, as we listen, well, okay, they can't, as a young child, it's hard for them to say, well, no, this is going to be useful and this is not going to be useful. Based on what? Like, how do they base that? Oh, this is good, this is not good. But as an adult, as we grow with experience and we listen to things, no, it's not worth my time to listen to that. Yes, that is worth my time to listen to that. So we are less open-minded. And by growing up, well, we sometimes fall into a rut, like in a certain way of seeing things, right? So we have to understand that maturity and profound life experience usually leads to rigidity in our ways, right? Which is, now this is very important, rigidity is the enemy of learning. I'll repeat that. Rigidity is the enemy of learning. And why is that? Well, I know how that works. I've been there. So you're like, we're rigid in our thoughts. So we don't allow anything else to challenge what we know right now, the statu quo, or our own paradigm, the way we see the world. So if we don't let our minds be open, well, how are we going to change? How are we going to learn? So I'll repeat that again. Rigidity is the enemy of learning. Very, very important. As teachers, we need to provide to the learners the why. Okay? Are you providing the why? Is it clear? Are you telling them why they are learning what they're learning? Why you are teaching what you are teaching? So I'll ask you the question, are you providing the why to your students? That's very, very important. And why they need to change, for instance, why maybe they're seeing it this way, but they have to see it that way. You have to explain to them the why. That's very, very important. Now, the fourth trait. Now, maybe you know the old adage, the old saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Okay, in some cases, that is right. Now, I don't know how you see that. Like, can adults still learn in adulthood? I hope you say yes, because we do. Do we learn the same way as a child? Not really. Are we slower at learning? I think we are, in some sense, slower at learning things. But, and I say but, okay, very, very important. Generally, adults are slower at learning. But what happened? Adults learn to, or tend to learn not as rapid, but the depth of learning is different. Okay, the depth of learning. We're not maybe as quick to learn things, but we can dive into difficult concepts more than a child. That is different. The depth of learning, we can go deeper. Why? Well, because we have typically more knowledge. We have accumulated experience, and some even would call it wisdom in some circles. So because of that, well, we decipher what's right, what's wrong, and then we appreciate it more than that, and we see what's more practical. So if we see something that is pertinent for us to learn, well, we dive into it. We want to know more about it because we know that it's practical and that it'll give me something. So yes, we learn slower, but we can learn deeper. That is another trait of the adult. Now, number 5. Adults use their experience as a resource. Okay? Adults use their experience as a resource. So when they're learning things, when they're hearing things, seeing things, reading things, their experience is like almost like a conscience. It's there. And sometimes we go dig into it in our past experience, knowledge, or whatever. We go and dig into it. So it's like a resource for us. So our experience are a resource for us. So then I'll ask you this question. Since adult students, their prior experience is a resource for them, how does that modify, change the way we teach? Let's think about that. Now, if we think about it carefully, we, as facilitators of learning, teachers, need to use their prior experience in learning as a tool for them to learn greater things. It's a resource, right? A book is a resource. A video is a resource. PowerPoint is a resource. They're all resources, right? A tool or to show them something. We can use the resources around us. But don't forget, their prior experience in learning, what they already have accumulated, is also a resource for them and for you, for me. So we have to use that in our class. So simply as, let's say we were introducing a new subject. What could we do? Well, ask your students, what do you know about the subject? You know, you can, then the conversation can go for quite a while, and you can teach just with a conversation. Sometimes even students don't realize that they know certain things. And they hear a colleague saying something, oh, okay. So the colleague might know a specific thing they don't know, but that makes them think about something else and they say it. So basically, what are you doing? You're facilitating what's going on. Now, as you're facilitating that, you want to challenge them, right? And you might introduce a new concept, a new knowledge in your teaching, right? And to make them reflect. That's what we do as teachers. So that's very interesting. Now, the sixth one, and I know I've talked about that already, is their motivation. Though. So another trait of the adult, well, I'll ask you the question. Is it more intrinsic or extrinsic? I hope you got it right. Is an adult learner more intrinsic motivation or extrinsic motivation? In, X, or out? Yeah, it's intrinsic. It's within them, typically. Yes, we can have some young adults, learners that their parents have sent them to college. They didn't really want to go. Or society dictated or that they have to go to college, or maybe all their family have been to college, so they have to go to college, so they feel an external pressure to go. I do understand that. So in some situations, that's how it is. But in other situations, adults, even young adults, they want to learn. They want to know things. They want to have other skills because they don't want to stay where they are right now. Maybe they're working for a small salary or maybe no salary, and they want to provide for their family. They want to have a life. They have goals in view. So that's intrinsic. So we have to be very consider that. We have to understand that as teachers. So the motivation is a driving force behind learning. That's very important. And we're going to talk about that even in other courses, even in this courses, the role of motivation in learning. If someone is not motivated, they won't learn. Okay, so that we have to be very, very, very careful at. It's crucial to tap into the learner's intrinsic impetus with the right thought-provoking material that will question conventional wisdom and stimulate his mind. How do we know that students aren't motivated? There's many things that we know. Sometimes they're sleeping in class. I hope it's not what's happening in your classes, but it does happen. Sometimes they're on their phone or they're talking to someone else. Sometimes they're just not there. Okay? They're not motivated to come to your classes or whatever, to your seminars or whatever. They're not motivated. But if you give them thought-provoking questions, what will happen in their mind? It'll stimulate like, oh, and their motivation is just going to go up. So that's one thing we have to think about when we're teaching as teachers. Think about the motivation. Okay, that's very, very important. Now, the seventh one, which is very important also, we call it multi-level responsibilities. Now, I have students in my class that are mature students, 40, 50 years old, that are coming back to college to get a degree. Now, it's very different when you're 40 or 50 years old going back to college than when you're 20, for instance, or 19. at 17, 18, 19 years old, you don't have a lot of responsibilities. You don't have a mortgage. Sometimes you don't have a house. You don't have children. You have a job sometimes. But I do have mature students that have children at home, that have a job, part-time job, even sometimes a full-time job while going full-time to school. So while they're sitting in your class, when they're in front of you, they have a lot of things on their mind. Maybe the phone will ring and the child that is, sick or something. So we have to understand that as teachers. So sometimes we have to be a bit more flexible. Now the last one is they have high expectations. So adult learners have high expectations. They want to be taught about things that will be useful to their work and their future career. So when you're teaching them, make sure you're giving them something solid. We need to tailor to them for that. They have high expectations, so don't just give something simple. Challenge them, give them something useful, give them some tools for their life. That is very, very important. Now let's go through, just briefly, again, the 8 traits of the adult learner. So first one, self-direction. Second one, practical. Okay, so practical and result-oriented. Third one, less open-minded. Fourth, slower learning, but deeper learning. Very important. Fifth, they use their personal experience as a resource. The sixth one, the motivation, which is intrinsic. 7, multi-level responsibility. So while they're in classroom, they're thinking about a lot of things. And lastly, high expectation. So when they're going back to school, when they are in school, in college, in vocational school, they have high expectation, most of them. So we have to make sure as teachers that we give them something that will be useful for them in the future. Thank you.